Hernandez. My pronouns are he, him, él, and I'm a student at the University of Laverne, as well as a member of the ULV LGBTQ plus coalition. And today joining me, we also have.
Hi, I'm Andy Steck. I am the advisor for the LGBTQ plus coalition, and I'm also associate professor in the educational studies program.
Thank you, Andy. And welcome to our event, The Stories of Our Lives, and thank you for joining us. Before we get started, let us recognize the Tongva tribe. The Tongva are the first people of the land where ULV resides. And today we want to acknowledge them and thank you for the use of the sacred land. We also want to acknowledge our Muslim community on campus and wish them a happy Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. I also want to invite you to, before we get started, to a special event that's being hosted by the ULV LGBTQ plus coalition in partnership with the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life. We're calling this event the LGBTQ plus Community Luncheon. This event will be held on Thursday, April 29th at 12 p.m., 12 noon. And this event is going to be a space for the community to come together to reflect on the events and experiences that we have had during the month-long April celebration, and just a space to further celebrate our community. You can RSVP in Campus Labs. Also, know that we will be providing food for 25 Leos. And so if you're interested in receiving a discount voucher for food through DoorDash or some other delivery company, we are also asking that you fill out a gift verification form. So you will need to RSVP, then also complete and send back a gift authorization form in order to be provided with an access code. More information will be available on Campus Lab. Also, we have an announcement from Andy.
Yes, we're extending an invitation to all the faculty and staff to join a new LGBTQ plus affinity group. We haven't started yet, but we'd like to get one started. If you're interested in being on the mailing list, send me an email at asteck, my last name, STECK, @laverne.edu, and we'll make sure you get invited to our first get-together, whenever that might be, as soon as we get enough people who might be interested. And we'd love to have any staff or faculty who would like to join us. Thanks, Nestor.
Thank you, Andy. Today we'll be inspired and empowered by the personal narratives from the ULV LGBTQ campus community. If you are not one of the panelists and identify as an LGBTQ plus person and would like to share your story, you can send a message to Misty Livingston, privately, and we will have space for 1 or 2 people to share their stories at the end of the program. Also, we are recording this event, and by attending, you are consenting to being recorded. And as for now, let the stories flow.
Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Norma Juarez Durian. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am a research and instruction librarian at the Wilson Library here at ULV. And today I'm introducing a video message from Dr. James Garcia.
Hi, Laverne community, and I hope that each and every one of you is engaged in April 2021 programming. Many of you may not know me. My name is Dr. James J. Garcia. I am assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Laverne. And I was asked by Misty Livingston to talk a little bit about, my experiences as faculty working with LGBTQ students at Laverne. Unfortunately, I have a lot of other commitments and I can't make it to this actual event. But I'll share a little bit of about what I've learned working with LGBTQ students. So I identify first as a gay Latino, right? And so a lot of the students that seek me as a mentor tend to be LGBTQ people of color. And so one of the things that really has stuck out to me is how much mentorship students that are LGBTQ people of color want from faculty at the University of Laverne. So oftentimes my role as a mentor has been to reassure, to validate their experiences, right? And not minimize their experiences with discrimination or anti-gay, anti-bisexual, anti-lesbian, anti-trans, sentiments that they may hear from other faculty or even people outside of the university, right? And so a lot of the time spent, whether it be in my teaching, one-on-one with students, or in my research, mentoring students on research, or in my research lab, right, when I used to be, back in the day, one-to-one and collecting data with people, would be spent on processing with students their experiences with discrimination, whether it be anti-LGBTQ discrimination or anti-people of color discrimination. So, racial ethnic discrimination. So I think that's a valuable thing to acknowledge, right? That yes, LGBTQ folks are discriminated against, and not or, and LGBTQ people of color have experiences that are much more unique and much more intense than simply LGBTQ experiences. So with folks who identify as LGBTQ people of color, there's discrimination coming from multiple fronts, so to speak, right? And so my job as faculty has been to really, not only process but also empower students. I do this through, allowing them to become first author on a particular topic that they're interested in researching, by presenting to the university community, by co-authoring book chapters with me, right? To really elevate voices, right, of LGBTQ people of color within the larger scheme of not larger scheme, the larger picture of promoting LGBTQ well-being. So that's something that I've kind of experienced as faculty, with the students that I've mentored at ULV. I think what's also something that comes up a lot is the low representation of LGBTQ faculty and even lower representation of LGBTQ people of color faculty. And so oftentimes students come to me and they say, I've never had a openly gay professor or a Latino professor or a gay Latino professor, right? And so there's something to be said about that, right? The academy, academia, higher education tends to be predominantly white, straight spaces. So it tends to be reserved for folks who are white and are heterosexual and cisgender. So I think, one of the things that I again, through my research, through my elevation of student voices in those leadership positions for students, right, as first author on publications and all that stuff, is to really center the narratives of those that are at the really fringes and margins of society. And so, this representation question of why do we have so little LGBTQ faculty, why do we have so little people of color LGBTQ faculty, I think is reflective of society in general, right? So it's not a Laverne problem. It's a society, at large problem. And so until we recognize that the academy is not built as equal access for all, and that we really need to center the voices that have been at the margins, that's, I think, where we can make a little bit of progress and say, well, let's put our money where our words are, right? And we're gonna intentionally, recruit and retain, LGBTQ people of color faculty, in different departments, and these are the incentives, and this is why we want to do this, right? So that's something else that I've seen as faculty while mentoring LGBTQ students, and more specifically LGBTQ students of color. So I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity, Misty, and the Center for Multicultural Services, and allowing me to share a little bit about my experiences as faculty at the University of Laverne. Thank you so much, and take care.
Thank you so much. I know that Professor Garcia, hopefully you will catch the recording. Thank you for starting us off with a foundation of awareness and representation for the LGBTQ community. Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Myrna Hugo, and I know some of you I have not yet met. I work in the Office of Civic and Community Engagement. My current pronouns are she and hers. Our next speaker heads the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, and that is located in the Ludwig Center, for those of you who are familiar with it. Um, she also has served as our interfaith university chaplain since 2011. And while teaching religion and specialized courses for the philosophy and religion department. I want to say welcome and thank you, Dr. and Reverend Zandra Wagner, for being the second stitch in this tapestry of voices today. The floor is yours, Reverend.
Thank you so much, Myrna. So again, my name is Zandra, and I identify as lesbian and queer. And I want to focus my time on the intersection of being both spiritual and queer. So I'm an ordained minister in the Christian tradition, the tradition that founded this university. And I just want to say that my ordination was very controversial in my denomination nationally. It was a controversy really around my sort of feminist and liberal ideas, but I was accused of being many things. I was accused of being lesbian. I was accused of being a witch. I was accused of being pagan, and I was accused of, being subject to evil forces. Many of those words I affirm, even if I don't necessarily identify with them. But I do identify as lesbian. They didn't know that at the time. But the fear of that was real, and it communicated to me, right? Something about that my tradition, or at least some individuals within my tradition, did not want me ordained. Let me go back to my notes. Today I am out and ordained. About half of the people associated with my denomination nationally would like to strip my ordination. And the other half are allies who protect that ordination. I'm very fortunate as an out lesbian who's also a minister to be working at the University of La Verne, where my queer identity is valued and seen as an asset rather than a problem. And it helps me know that my livelihood is not at risk. Because many, if their ordinations are stripped, you're also taking away their livelihood. So queer people are twice as likely nationally to say that they do not participate in religious or spiritual communities. And while I'm not here to advocate for queer people to be part of religious communities that are rejecting and offering prejudice, the queer community does not need that at all. Yet I also want to say that in many ways, because of the way queerness and religion have gotten linked up, it's meant that religion and spirituality for some have been robbed, where the communities do not make it possible for those identities to sit next to each other. And so a lot of my passion is around making these connections. It's important to me to return spirituality and religion to the queer community. Again, not necessarily because the queer community may not need that church or spiritual community, but the churches, the mosques, the temples, the communities, they need their queer members. And I also want to say that for queer people, that spiritual rootedness, the access to spirituality and religion is a cultural asset. And so when it's taken away, it is actually something that's taking away community. It's taking away practices of well-being and access to this inner life that can create sources of peace and harmony. In my own activism and advocacy, I work nationally with organizations that work with religious communities who are willing to be out and open and supportive of the queer community, working with those communities who are just at the edge of maybe making that decision because it is good for the youth and young adults of their communities who are at deep risk of rejection and mental health concerns and suicide and homelessness. I often say that the queer community has much to offer to the world widely and spiritual communities in particular. There is wisdom carried within the queer community that's born of survival and of taking risk. The wisdom is not just a gift to the queer community, although it is, and it's ours to claim. And I want to say that maybe I'll just wrap this up with just saying I think some of that wisdom is about authenticity and honesty, which helps invite everyone to be more real, true, and human. There's the wisdom of ambiguity and fluidity and choice and crossing over, which frees all of us from the constrictions of categories. And there's wisdom born of love and following one's heart, and wisdom born of resilience and tenacity and courage, which is really a gift of thriving. So with that, I'm just thankful for the queer community and its gifts, and want to celebrate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Zandra. Thank you for always being so present and supportive to the entire ULV community, our students, me. Sometimes I just come in Zandra's office and I'm like, Zandra, I need to like vent, and Zandra just brings me down. I call her Zandra. So thank you. I would now like to I'm sorry. My name is Misty Livingston and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Christian Bracho, who I met when we started at our orientation onboarding process on the same day. We have been buddies ever since. It is a pleasure getting to know you more, Dr. Bracho, and take it away.
Thank you so much, Misty. Yes, we are orientation buddies forever. And Zandra, thank you so much for your talk. I maybe remember that lately I've been saying to people, I'm a recovering Catholic. You know, as I get older, I start to burn that Guadalupe candle a lot more, you know. So thank you for sharing your narrative, and to James too. When I was thinking about what story I wanted to tell, I came back to, for those of you who know me, one of the most important relationships in my life, which is my mom. And I talk about her a lot. And I believe that when someone has died, I think one of the ways that you keep them alive is by talking about them, because she is here with me right here. And actually, she's a picture of her right here as well. Look how beautiful she is. That smile is incredible, right? And the reason I wanted to share the story is that, you know, even though we had this great relationship, it wasn't always like that. When I was a kid, when I was 12 years old and started to feel that I was gay and different and I was being bullied, I began to really struggle with my mom, because I could feel her wanting me to not be gay. I could feel her subtle kinds of comments about my femininity or about who I was spending time with. And I was having a really hard time in junior high. It was a really ugly time. This was like 1989. You know, there was not a lot of support at all for young gay people. And so I began to really have thoughts about hurting myself. And I wrote a letter to one of the few friends that I had about it. And my mom found the letter before I gave it to him. And when she confronted me about it, she was like, what would people think if they found this? Like, what would his family think if they saw this letter, right? And I remember being so hurt that it wasn't that I was hurting, it was that I could bring shame to my family. That was her focus, you know? And she never brought up the fact that I had in this letter mentioned wanting to really do damage to my own person, you know? So that really broke my relationship with my mom. I really began to resent her, really push back against her, where I had been a mama's boy as a kid, I began to really become rebellious. I was mean to her. I would call her names. I would stay out late and not call, you know, just really had a really ugly relationship with her. And in high school, when I actually did try to hurt myself and ended up in the hospital, I pushed her away. I didn't make any effort to see her, and I made her feel she was not welcome in my life. So I think that's one of the reasons why I went so far away for college, because I wanted to just start over and be as far away from my mom and from my family. My mom had really made me feel like I had been seeing somebody and I could tell she hated him, you know? So I was just really angry at her and resentful. But then in college, you know, I was 3,000 miles away and I was missing my mom. I was missing something, you know? And so she and I started having these late night conversations. I'd be up at midnight in Rochester, New York, cold AF, as you could say. It was really cold. And my mom, you know, would pick up the phone and we would talk for like an hour sometimes. And it was really beautiful. And in my sophomore year, one night, the stuff in high school came up and we just talked about it. And my mom said, "I'm so happy we're finally talking about this." And I was like, me too, you know? And that began a real thawing of that relationship. It wasn't perfect. We had lots of fights, like when I dyed my hair blonde, when I got my ear pierced, when I got my eyebrow pierced. I went through a whole rebellious phase in college as well. We had a lot of fights about my identity and my right to be expressing myself the way I wanted to. But then, you know, in my 20s, we really reconnected because my dad died of cancer when I was 22. And suddenly we needed each other, you know? And I remember I ran the San Francisco Marathon and she came with me to San Francisco. I've been training with APLA, AIDS Project Los Angeles. And my mom was loving it. She was like hanging out with all the gays and having the best time. And, you know, she told me, "Your dad would be so proud of you." And then we would stop at a diner on the way home. We road tripped and she was like, "This is my son. This is a Christian." I had 2 boys, 2 girls, and Christian, right? Tuve 2 hijos, 2 hijas y Cristian, is what she'd always say, right? And I was like, "Mom, why are you saying that?" You know? And she told me, you know, "I want people to know that I'm proud to have a gay son. I'm so happy that I have a gay son," you know? And that just was everything, you know? And at her funeral, actually, one of her coworkers came up to me and was like, "Your mom was so proud of you. She always talked about you." And when I told her I had a gay son, she really helped me understand how I needed to be there for him. And that by saying to people that I have a gay son, that was a way of making him be seen and heard, you know, to make him know that I wasn't ashamed of him. I was proud of him. And so I'm just so thankful that my mom and I got to have that reconciliation, you know, and that in some way she was able to teach other people how to do that. So I feel empowered by that relationship, and I hope that there's anybody in your life who hasn't been there for you the way you needed them to. I hope that there's some way you can find that connection, because it's so important and it's so healing to have that. So thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about her. You can see her one more time. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry, I was being so moved, I forgot I was on. Thank you, Christian. That was beautiful. I'm Xandra. Once again, my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Andy Steck, who we've already met at the very beginning. Dr. Steck is Associate Professor of Education. He is a really well-loved faculty member for his excellence as a teacher and mentor. And I get to hear about him you know, from students who enjoy him so much. And he's also the advisor for the Laverne ULV LGBTQ plus coalition. Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Xandra. It's hard to follow Christian, and I'm a little emotional about it. So Christian, was really heartfelt. And my story is a little bit different than maybe many of yours. I'm older than many of you are, and I'm of the generation that I knew I was gay when I was growing up, but I didn't know what that was all about. I didn't have any role models. I had no friends that I knew were gay. And later on, did I find out that many of them were, but nobody came out, and at least to me. And I knew when I was in college I was, and did come across some friends who were, but I knew I wanted to be a teacher and I wanted to be a dad. And back in the 70s, we were not allowed to. Well, we couldn't teach. We couldn't teach if we came out, if we were an out gay male or lesbian. And so I repressed all those feelings because I wanted to teach more than anything else. I've been in education 45 years, but ever since 7 years old, I wanted to be a teacher, and I coerced my sisters into playing school with me where I was the teacher and they were always the students. And I just knew I couldn't be gay, and I wanted to be a dad. That's my one of my biggest goals was to be a dad. So I poured myself into my work, my teaching, and I did get married, and did have 2 girls who are very close to me. They live out here. I'm from Buffalo, New York, but they live out here on the West Coast with me here. One lives about 5 miles from me and has 2 two boys, who are my grandboys, of course. And one of them just told me the other day, he's in 8th grade, that he is gay, and he wanted me to know. And he hasn't told a lot of people, and he's even told his mom or dad yet, or his stepfather who he lives with, but he wanted me to know. He spends a lot of time with me, and I am married now to a guy that I think is terrific. We've been together for 22 years, and I was married to a woman for 23 years prior to that. My story is all about how I had to come. I wanted to come out, and I knew I needed to be true to myself. I knew my wife at the time and I were having some problems, not with me being gay. I never, ever did anything at all in regards to that. There were some other issues we had with health and that. And I knew I could have a better life if I did come out. And so I did do that. And here I did that as an administrator of a school. I lived in a small town at the time. And of course, administrators live in glass houses when you're in a small town. So immediately everyone had rumors all over the town about me with the other gentleman who was coming out about the same time, that we were already hooking up and we were going to be partners. And that wasn't the case at all. He was a friend of mine, but that was all. So it was a real struggle to come out. Not only that, the year that I came out, 5 of my teachers got divorced. And I thought, what's in the water here in town? And one of them came out as a gay male himself. And so I don't know if I was a role model there or what was going on, but I didn't feel it. It was a real struggle, and it was really very hard. But I'm glad it happened. Life is really good. My daughters are really close to me, like I said, and my grandsons are both as well. And I have gone on to, I went on to become a professor after I was an elementary school principal, an elementary school teacher. And I can remember I was a little leery about coming out. Well, when I first joined the first university that I went to, the first college I went to, during my interview, after my interview, I walked around to see if I could just feel if I could be safe on this campus by coming out. And I saw Safe Zone stickers on doors, and I knew immediately this was a campus for me because I felt safe being there. And it came out to, it was a good place for me to come out. Although I still was very shy about telling my students. And one day, one of my students came up to me and she said, "I am so glad I have a gay teacher." And I was so taken back by it. I said, how do you know? She said, "Oh, you have a triangle with a rainbow on your watch." And I went, "Oh my gosh," I had forgotten I was wearing it. And I thought it was my mannerisms or something that, and because I didn't say anything. And from then on, I felt much more safer about being out. And I have made that my mission. When I went to work on my doctorate then, my dissertation was on interviewing secondary principals and how they keep the students safe in their high schools, how they keep their LGBT youth safe. And that led me to write some articles about keeping LGBT youth safe. When I came to Laverne after several other universities, which I had previously, when I moved out to California, that's one of the things I wanted our campus to be safe for our students. And I was able to join on to the LGBT group at the time, the club at the time, because they were looking for an advisor. And I was so excited about being able to be that. And for the last 10 years, I have been the advisor for the LGBT club. as well as then a group of people, John Bartelt and Kathy Duncan, and several other people decided they wanted to start some safe zone training. So they asked me if I would join them and do that. So we have been doing that. It's just been recently that we haven't provided any sessions, but we're going to start that back up with the affinity group. So I'm excited about that because those were well attended and people really wanted to learn how to be allies. And that's what the safe zone training is. And once you go through the ally training, you get a sticker that you can put on your door of your office or any place, so students know that if they need to talk to somebody, you at least have some knowledge, some resources for them, or if they need that, or just a listening ear. And I think that is so important. But that is my story, and I stand by it, and now I'm not afraid to share it, and I do share it often, and I do talk to my students. I teach a children's literature course, and we do have a segment on the course called Culturally Diverse Books, and part of that is looking at children's books that have LGBT protagonists in them or stories about LGBT youth, and I'm excited by them. So the diverse books that are coming out. They're often challenged, and we talk about that. In 2019, LGBT youth books were the most challenged books of all times. This year, that was 2020. In 2021 so far, the most challenged are of racism, of talking about racists, and that's interesting. That has changed. Although the #1 book called George, about a little boy who wants to be Charlotte in Charlotte's Web play, and teacher would not let him be Charlotte. I won't tell you the rest because you have to go out and find that book. And if your library's open or when the library's open, get the book called George out. And it's a cute story, but there are a lot of them out. And so I'm very happy to be able to share all of that with my students as well. And if I have any advice, and sometimes they ask me, what advice would I give my students? I would say to them, be yourself, be true. That's what I told my grandson when he looked at me and said, is it okay? I looked at him and said, you be whatever you want to be, Xavier, and don't let other people stand in your way or judge you, because they will. And you know what? There are haters out there, but guess what? There are a lot of people who love you and support you. And I just encourage you to be yourself. Okay, that's my story today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Steck. That was a lovely story. And I'm so happy. It's so, your grandson is so super lucky to have you in his life. Oh, no, I'm gonna cry. Okay. So now I'm happy to introduce Savannah Garcia. She's the director of the Academic Success Center and my colleague in the Library and Learning Commons. And we have a video prepared with her narrative.
You may need to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Savannah Garcia, and I serve as the director of the Academic Success Center at ULV. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you today, but I did want to
actually, Missy, you may need to start over and share it with computer sound when you share your screen.
I hear it okay.
Oh, okay. It's really far away though.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how to do that.
Oh, when you go ahead and stop sharing your screen, please. And then when you click on share your screen, you have the option to share computer sound. in the bottom right-hand corner. I want to make sure that's highlighted as well.
Yeah.
Right here? Do you, oh.
Well, we can't see it now, but yeah. and
This is called being in community, y'all.
And now when you start to share the screen, we should hear her video.
Okay, I hope I'm doing it correctly.
All right, if it says share computer sound, you should be good.
I don't see share computer sound.
Oh, when you click on your share option?
No.
Do you see basic and advanced at the top?
I see advanced, yes. And it says, it's just letting me know who can share. Just one person can share at a time.
So then go to basic, please. And then when you go to basic, you should be able to see
at the bottom, it sometimes says
at the bottom, share computer sound in the bottom left-hand corner.
I want y'all to come over here and do it for me, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't see it.
When you click on share screen.
I see when I do shared. Okay, let me click on shared screen. Okay, do you see it right now?
No, and not until you share it. But when you look at it, the option in the bottom left-hand corner to share computer sound.
Right now?
Before you share it.
Okay.
So now we see it. Let's go.
I don't. Can you hear it at all, or do you have to put your head in the computer to hear it?
Wait, we can hear it, but we have to get real close.
Okay, so for the sake of this, we're going to give me a tutorial next time. But for the sake of this, can everybody just lean in so we can hear Savannah's story? Okay, thank you, D. Hill. I appreciate you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Savannah Garcia, and I serve as the director of the Academic Success Center at ULV. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you today, but I did want to just share my experience with being part of the LGBT community. In preparation for this event, the title really stood out in my mind, Stories of Our Lives. And I feel like I'm just one small piece of that. My story is one of many. And the one thing that really kind of is standing out to me right now is how privileged I am. Although, you know, there's been times where I've felt either discriminated against or not supported by those in my life. I feel blessed in that my 3 daughters have accepted me and my partner. They love me unconditionally. I've had multiple friends that have shown unconditional support and love. And I don't feel that others that are part of the LGBT community have maybe experienced the same. So privilege is just something that really stands out in my mind. And I feel blessed. You know, I'm watching the George Floyd or Mr. Chauvin trial and thinking about the fact that I haven't had a knee on my neck for 9.5 minutes. I'm not a trans individual who is worried about violence or being murdered. Yes, have there been times where I've been in spaces where I have felt unsafe or fearful? Absolutely. But in many ways, I feel privileged that I wasn't kicked out of my home. I came out as an adult after 2 marriages with members of the opposite sex. And although I've lost many people in my life, I believe that that has strengthened me as a woman, as an individual. And so that I just come back to that word privilege. In many ways, I feel very privileged. And so speaking today at this event, that's really what I want to share, is that I believe that, you know, I do have that privilege. And for that, I'm grateful. And, you know, as far as hardships that I've endured, in the grand scheme of things, they seem very small. And so I celebrate all of you that are speaking today, sharing your stories. I think that they're all important and they're all unique. And mine is just one small story in a larger conversation. So thank you for allowing me to just speak today. And I just really want to leave you all with the fact that I feel privileged, and I'm not sure what to do with that right now. So thank you.
Thank you, Savannah, especially for highlighting the connectedness and the two things that we feel in our identities, or multiple things that we feel in our identities. Savannah is a trooper. She lost power today, but she got on her phone and she made it happen. So we are so grateful to her for that. And so my name is Ebony. I am an associate director in the Academic Success Center, and I am so pleased to be here with you all today. And to introduce someone that I met over a virtual happy hour for Black Faculty and Staff Association. And we actually stayed after to talk. And the thought in my mind was, awesome, don't judge me. I'm a child of the 90s. That's the word that I chose. And so I get to introduce this awesome individual, Dee Hill, who is an adjunct photography professor at Laverne, is the photo department manager, and also an interdisciplinary artist who has been celebrated all across the country for the beautiful work that he contributes. So please join me in a virtual hand clap to welcome Dee Hill.
Thank you, Ebony Williams. Thank you. And I love that we have these moments. And the part of that moment was coming to the University of Laverne as a new adjunct instructor and artist and advocate. And some people ask, what do you do again? Well, I am an artist, I'm an educator, and I'm also an entrepreneur. But going into that space was so amazing to recognize the support that I have here at the University of Laverne. And I've been here for a year now. Who knew that the pandemic would happen and we would be limited so that way I can meet all of you at some point in some time physically, but this is an honor, so I thank you so much for the invitation to share my narrative. I was kind of debating about what type of narrative I would share, and one that comes out is pretty much what I do with my work as an artist, and then what I bring into my curriculum and what I do when I interact with my students in the classroom, and that's being the other. I am an othered Black trans man, and before I was an othered Black African-American woman. And I haven't really seen much changes over my journey other than my growth as a person, wanting to give back to communities, wanting to give back to those that do not understand you, because I was never understood in my mind. As a kid, my mom would tell you that I was doing so much, trying to bring people together, introduce myself, and then I would bring them over to the house. And my mom was like, oh, now hold on, who are these people that you're bringing to the house? And I was like, well, they want to be loved. They want to have fun. They don't know anybody else. This is actually the person that they talk fun about this student right here. And they're my friend. And as I've become an adult, and as I've decided to do my gender transition during my 30s, some people look at me and say, oh, you're still so young. No, boo, I've been around for a while. So in my 30s, when I did my transition, I realized that I was doing everything that I was doing as a child, everything I was doing as a person, but people couldn't understand who I was. And I didn't know what that meant. When I did the transition of being happy as the man that I've always been, but didn't know what that was, and we had that conversation going on, and I've heard a few narratives, stories before, where you just don't know who you are, and then find the aha moment happens. So the aha moment happened in my 30s, and I said, I'm ready to give just as I would, but maybe if I love myself more, people will be more open and receptive to receiving what I'm doing. And that's all it took, was for me to love myself more. And I can walk into any room, I can walk into any space and say, hey, what can I do? How can I help? And things just happen. And I always, Zandra that was an amazing narrative that you shared with being the chaplain. So praise God for that, because I'm also an ordained deacon. And I thought I couldn't find a church. I was away from a church for about 15 years. because I didn't think that someone would be able, or a church would accept me as a trans person or who I was. But I did find a church. It was a non-denominational church and very much based in Southern Baptist. So I started seeing some correlations from what my family brought me up in from Little Rock, Arkansas, which was Baptist church and Southern Baptist. But I also saw an opportunity to talk to multiple cultures and multiple races and multiple nationalities just by loving myself first and then getting back to humanity. So when I'm doing my deaconship and when I'm praying for people, or when people want me to be a part of sharing my narrative and my story, it's always come back to, well, I love myself and I love you. You can't love another person if you don't love yourself. So that's the problem that we are dealing with. If you can't find out your own imperfections, if you can't understand your own idiosyncrasies, then you cannot be able to walk into spaces to say, I love you. I want to be an ally. I want to participate. What does that mean? So when that happened for me in my 30s and accepting me as a Black man that I was all along, I've been able to walk under an amazing anointing that's beyond myself. And all of us have that anointing. We just have to tap into it sometimes. And it's called humanity. And once you tap into that, then you're able to share your story and share your narrative and then have this correlation like, oh, I had that experience too. Exactly. Because we're both human beings. We both all had to grow up. We both had to grow. We both had to get frustrated. And so it's so amazing now to embrace my journey, but I want to tie in what all of us want is someone that we respect the most to love us back. And my mom was the person I wanted to respect me the most when I did the transition. I'm not gonna cry, but I'm gonna cry. My mother was so fearful of the fact that I was gonna do all these great things, but I was gonna do it as a Black man. And she said, baby, do you really wanna do that? Because I don't want nobody to kill you because you found happiness. And I don't want that phone call. I've seen it on the news. I don't want it for you. And I said, it's not gonna happen, Mom. I promise you, it's not gonna happen. Because I know how to be respectful. I know how to love myself, and I know how to catch those signals of this is not safe, this is safe. So it's okay. She used to call me every 2 weeks, and then she stopped calling me. Then I had to start calling her. I said, Mom, do you want to talk to me? And then when my voice started changing, she would cry because I never did an outgoing voicemail, by the way. So she was definitely dealing with the fact that she was losing her daughter, but she was gaining a son. And she said, I don't know how to raise a son. I've never raised a son before, baby. I said, that's okay, Mom, but you raised me. So it's okay. And we went through that process for about 2.5, 3 years. And we're finally getting to that point now where she's willing to come to my art openings. She's willing to come to do and realize that she's an advocate. I didn't realize I was doing this. I made her an advocate, right? So we have to realize when we decide to find happiness, we're making our parents follow us too. And sometimes they don't want to go. So she didn't want to be an advocate like, oh, my firstborn, yes, my oldest that lives in Los Angeles. You know, she learned how to change the dialogue of, hey, I still love my firstborn baby, but here's how I'm going to help you all. Also understand the changes will happen with your children, but they're still the same. You just have to adjust. And every time we grow, we have to adjust. And she adjusted, and I'll never forget when I went back home to Little Rock, Arkansas, that's where I'm born and raised, went back home, and the whole thing is, let's go to the nail salon and get our pedicure, Medicare done. I'm like, well, you know, I've never been into that, but not a problem, Mother, I will go with you. And my sister went with us as well. And we went, and there was a patron in the salon that said, oh my goodness, I wish my son would come with me sometimes to the nail salon. How did you get him to get here? And this whole conversation ended up happening. And my mom was doing her best with saying, well, he's out of town. And well, yeah, he, she would slip, but she would go back. And the moment we left that salon and we're walking back to the car in the parking lot, she said, I did good, didn't I? I said, yes, you did, Mom. You did good. I love you. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap up my narrative of understanding how when you love yourself first, then you're able to walk into other dimensions, other spaces to help others love others. But you can't help somebody if you don't love yourself. And I can't be the great educator that I can be in the classroom without loving myself. I can't be the great leader that I'm supposed to be without loving myself and then being open to the growth of everybody else's identities and places. And I've learned that through my transition as just being me as an artist, being me as a person throughout my life, and saying, yes, I am the Black man, but then I have all these Black man issues. Because let's come on now, let's keep it real. There's some problematics with going on with Black men being eliminated. So that's where my mom was like, why would you want to take this life? I said, well, I have no choice. Look at my body. Look at my skin. I have no choice. And I have to be happy, but I have to learn how to navigate it. And then that's when my father comes in and helps me navigate. But I am doing my best to give back and being conscious of loving myself to help others love themselves and participate and encourage them to be open to whoever they are. And it's been working, and I'm going to continue to go, and I won't change my narrative. I won't change my path. I will not change my energy. If I'm invited, I'm invited. If I'm not, you're lost, because I'm all about helping us expand, thinking outside of the normative, thinking outside of one way one person should exist in this world.
Well, I want to thank you, Deacon Hill. Deacon Hill did say that he's a deacon, and you know how those deacons like to talk.
Wait, don't make me pull out the collection plate.
So for the sake of time, I want to thank you, Deacon Hill, but I also would like to encourage the other panelists to stay within a 3 to 5 minute time frame so that we can hear everyone's story. And Deacon Hill, I met Deacon Hill a couple months ago, and it was like we clicked right off. So you have been a pleasure to work with, and I enjoy speaking with you every time we interact. Okay. I would like to now introduce Lourdes Jackson. Lourdes has always been supportive of the Center for Multicultural Services events. And on a personal note, anytime I would come into the Lefebvre College of Education Lost, she was always there with a beautiful smile like, oh, just right here. So thank you, Lourdes. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be in community. Thank you, everyone, for sharing such vulnerable, authentic stories to the many layers that are within our community. So I will try to be mindful to the 5 minute request by Misty. So, well, my story, I knew that I was different. I didn't fit the cookie cutter, layout since I was very young. So around 11 or 12, I had never heard of lesbians, gay, anything. The closest thing I got in the library was something about bisexual. So I thought, okay, maybe I'm bi. Okay, maybe, I don't know, but maybe. And in the process of that, I met two great gay males that were older than me. They were very kind. And that is where I got my introduction to feminism, lesbians, everything that came with that. And in that process, I found out who I was. And so I'm a queer indigenous femme who I've been myself since I began the beginning, I guess. And I'm the one, my parents had 4 children. I'm their oldest, and I'm the one that gave them the most white hair. I'm the one that always pushes them to understand things from a different perspective. I remember when I was 12 or 13, I told my mom, the first time I told her, I said, Mom, I think I'm bisexual or something. And, my mom was just my mom didn't understand, and she had a fit, but I still kept being me and learning and asking questions and things like that. And in the process of my curiosity and resilience of not wanting to be not stepping into what everybody else wanted me to be, I got to meet a lot of people who were in their own journey, and in the process, I've lost a lot of good friends to suicide because they had nowhere to go. I've lost two partners. One, my first partner was murdered. She was murdered because we were together. I lost my second partner 6 years ago now, and they had a heart attack. So in my journey of being myself and finding myself and growing, I've dealt with a lot of loss with a lot of really good people, and but also advocating for all the needs that we as human beings should have, regardless of what or of who we really are. One of the most beautiful stories that I always like to go back to is out of my parents. They had four children, and my youngest brother, his name's Angel. He's the youngest, and he's also gay. And I remember he was 14 years old, and he was scared to tell our parents. Mind you, my parents already knew about me. So I remember I told him, I said, I'll hold your hand and we'll tell them together. And if they have any issues with you, then they're gonna have to go through me. So we sat there and they talked to him, and he held my hand so tight it was purple at the end of that conversation. And he said what he had to say, and my parents hugged him and loved him. And he just needed to know, he just needed to know that I have you. I didn't have anybody. I had me, but I got you. And my parents, even if they couldn't understand, our parents love us in ways I can't even explain. And I love that I've heard from all of you of your parents standing up, even though they didn't understand it. My parents, till this day, they kind of fight it, but they try really hard. And so I always push them to understand that we weren't all born into this predisposition of being male or female. Some of us are more than that, and so I bring literature and we have discussions about it because I want them to make up their own mind. I don't want them to feel like they're being pressured, but you got to give them the connections to be able to understand things on their own and to say, okay, I get it. So if there's anything I can tell you about my life, because I don't have enough time, but it's that number one, what D. Hill said, you have to love yourself. That is so ridiculously important. And I was able to do that because, again, my mom and dad might not have understood, but they loved me enough to always say, be who you are. We might not get it, but be who you are. Second thing is, my spiritual walk. I don't label myself as a Christian because I really don't fit that, but I am a follower of Christ, and I'm also a Buddhist practitioner. Those two spaces call me, and they speak to me. But also, you have to understand that being in our community, for me, I made a commitment a long time ago that I knew I was always going to fight. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the reality of things that we're always going to have to advocate. We have to stay educated, and we have to be present for the younger generations to see us. And so we also carry this living history with us. Some of us that have been in it, that are older, I've met some really amazing people that have stories that I'll never understand because I wasn't born at their time. But to really understand everything that has already paved the way, all these people that invested their blood, sweat, and tears in life to put a different pathway for us to move forward. And we have to keep going until we get to the point where people are just seen as individuals and not all these extra layers that really have nothing to do with anything. And so if there's anything I can say is invest in yourself to know yourself and love yourself, and that means seek community, look for a good mentor, or go get therapy, find the things that fulfill you. We all get fulfilled differently. I'm not saying everybody's way is this way or that way, but find the things that fill you with love and that challenge you, and also always don't be afraid to do a self inventory to really check in where you're at, to stay authentic in your path. But I think the University of Laverne is a place that I always see growing more and more. So I'm super excited to be a part of it. And I was very humbled to be invited to give a little bit of my narrative. So I will leave it at that because I could keep going. So thank you.
Lourdes, I had made so many connections with your story that and we worked together at the same college, and I did not know all of that. And I am seem so much closer to you now than I was before this. I think we're moving ahead because I think Kathy Duncan could not be here. So I'm here to present our next presenter. You know, I'm Andy Steck. My pronouns are he, him, and his. And I have the privilege and the honor to introduce Nestor Hernandez, who I have gotten to know really well through the LGBTQ club. And he is a senior this year and will be graduating shortly. And his major is in religion. So Nestor, take it away.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, so in thinking about my story and what I wanted to share this morning, the word that kept on coming to mind was community, and the importance of, to be more specific, the LGBTQ plus community in my life. So I knew I was different. I didn't know what it was, that I was actually queer. From a very young age, I remember I was like 3. I am from El Salvador. I was born in El Salvador. I came to this country when I was 4. So I remember in El Salvador, so I must have been like 3, maybe just 4. I remember knowing at that time that I was different. I didn't quite fit with the boys, and I was definitely not allowed to be with the girls either. So, so I found myself in this really tricky area, like just space. And so what I did was I kind of went inside. I became pretty quiet, pretty introverted. I didn't have an outlet or feel safe in expressing this difference. So I just kind of, just kind of went within. And so when I got to, of course, elementary school, then I knew as a kid would then start, teasing me and calling me names. And I was like, oh, well, this is the difference. And that makes sense. Because I did have crushes on little boys. I didn't have crushes on little girls. So I was like, okay, yeah, that's what's happening. And so, I also come from a Latino family who's very traditional, also very conservative as far as our religious views. And so growing up, I knew that I was not able to express who I was. I needed to keep that a secret just to keep myself, I felt safe. As I grew up being a teen, I knew, I kind of just knew that my parents just wouldn't understand and couldn't be able to, weren't going to accept me. And so I was afraid of being kicked out. And so, again, I just kept everything a secret. At this time, I'm still attending a church that was hostile towards me and spoke bad about who I was. And so I really internalized a lot of this stuff. However, when I was 19, I still lived at home with my parents, and I had a note that I had from a boy that I was talking to. And like a good Latino mom, she just went through my stuff and found that note. And so when I got home from work that day, I was greeted with that note and pretty much confronted about who I was. And it was a very difficult conversation. And as I had suspected, my parents did not understand. And so all my stuff was placed in black trash bags and put out on the porch. And that same day, I was pretty much told that I wasn't welcomed anymore unless I changed. And I wasn't ready to change. I was not going to change. I was done with hiding. And so, luckily I still had a job, and I was able to rent a garage and take my stuff with me. But slowly I started kind of coping and with illegal substances, which led to some destructive behavior. I lost my job. And so I literally ended up homeless on the streets of Hollywood, on the street, until I was able, through the street, you hear from other people about certain services that are available. And so I came across the Los Angeles LGBT Center. And I started going to their drop-in center, and they started to know me. A few months in, they were like, "Are you interested in getting off the streets and having a home?" And I was yes. I said yes, and so I got into their housing program. They literally clothed me, fed me, provided me with counseling so that I would stop hurting myself and get back on my feet. And so again, I don't know if you know this, but in the U.S., up to 40% of the homeless kids are LGBTQ plus, and so that's a lot of people out there, young people out there, and I was one of them, and so the center again was able to take care of me, and literally I think saved my life, and so again I go back to that word community. That was made possible through my community, through those that support me as a queer person, for all those donations, that money that goes into funding these programs. And to this day, I find that although things are better with my family and I'm no longer a 19-year-old kid, things aren't great. And unfortunately, I don't have the support of my family. But I do have the support of my LGBTQ plus community. And so that is, again, why that word community means so much to me, and more specifically, LGBTQ plus and allies community. So thank you so much for letting me share my story.
Thank you, Nestor. Thank you. And yes, community, lifesaver, queer community as lifesaver. Thank you. So I have the pleasure of introducing our next speaker, who is Aiden Izumi. Aiden graduated from the University of Laverne with a BA in 2015 and then an MA in 2018. He has come back to speak at the university. He spoke while he was a student, and he came back and spoke recently. And it's so good to have you back here again, Aiden. Aiden is currently working for a public charter high school, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Sandra, and for reaching out to me to participate. Any chance I get to sort of engage with the university, I always love. So my name is Aiden. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm a Japanese American transgender man, and I have had the honor of speaking at different ULV events throughout my time at the university. And I thought about just kind of doing, or I guess sharing my story in that same way. But when I saw the prompts, one immediately kind of stuck out to me. So I thought about going with my gut and trying this from a little bit of a different angle. And so I'm going to do it that way, I guess. So regardless, I guess, of how I felt my whole life, I spent the first 20 years of my life interacting with and being seen by the world as a girl or as a young woman. And when I started to look back at the chapters in my life, I realized that I've been breaking rules pretty much my entire life. Not in a bad way, but I looked back and I realized that really was a consistent theme in my life. So when I was about 3 years old, I sort of asserted my dislike of dresses and all things basically pink and girly bows and ribbons and such. I kind of went against societal expectations of what a little girl should be like. I was really masculine. I loved the, boys section of a store. I hated dolls and Barbies, anything pink. Pretty much the entire pink side of Toys R Us, if you can remember, or are old enough to have been able to shop there, that entire pink side of the store. when I was in elementary school, I pretty much hung out only with boys. I played sports. I was catching bugs and lizards, and I would come home with tears in my clothes and just dirt all over. I just wasn't your typical young girl I guess this would have been the early 90s. And in middle school, when it seems like all of my peers started to really embrace sort of the gender expectations and roles that are, I think, the majority and the most common, I just continued to go against them. I wore baggy t-shirts and jeans, always from the boys department of a store. I definitely did not embrace my changing body at that time. Hitting puberty was extremely uncomfortable for me. So while I had friends who were very excited to be able to, buy, I guess, a real bra and to wear clothes that were very form-fitting to show off that they had sort of, I guess, grown up and hit puberty, I was trying very hard to hide that and to not show that my body had changed. I was also told about what it was to be a good Japanese daughter, what that looked like, and that I should try harder to be like that, because I definitely was not. And I continued to sort of hold strong to being who I was, but that also meant sometimes being alone. In high school, I did come out as a lesbian first. I had no understanding or knowledge of the trans community, but I didn't have a lot of support or acceptance within the school that I went to either. And our senior yearbook pictures, they decided to do these uniform pictures where the girls wore drapes and the boys wore these tuxedos. And I opted to wear the tuxedo. And there were some folks at the school that actually had discussed not posting my picture in the yearbook and putting that like photo not available, because it broke the school's policy and rules on dress code for the school picture. At 20, I transitioned. I embraced my authentic self, and I continue to navigate a healthcare and legal system that was designed without LGBTQ folks in mind. But I keep pushing to advocate for myself and for others. And I think since transitioning, I kind of feel like I still am pushing a lot of the boundaries and places that boundaries that society has put in place. I think some days just living authentically, like as an LGBTQ person, is in itself breaking most rules. And so I think, it's beautiful in that way. I think living beyond boundaries that have been put in place has taught me a lot about empathy and compassion, and what unconditional love actually looks like. And it's something I wouldn't have gotten to experience if I had not had the opportunity to sort of experience some of these other limitations earlier in my life and the boundaries that were put in place. I feel like it wouldn't be right if I didn't sort of mention my family in this, because I feel like as much as I thought growing up my parents were really big rule followers, I think I learned to break the rules from my family. And so I do want to close by talking about them. My family made the conscious choice to embrace and to love me unconditionally. And there's something that my grandparents used to say, I don't know if it's a Japanese thing specifically, but basically they would say that the nail that sticks out is the one that gets struck. And so, if you stand out in society, you're going to get hit down. And a lot of Japanese folks tend to navigate the world that way, trying to just not rock the boat. And my family decided to support me and to advocate for me and for other LGBTQ folks. And so in doing that, they basically broke all the sort of rules of what it means to be a good Japanese family, and to not rock the boat and to cause, commotion or be the nail that sticks out and gets struck. My mom actually speaks around the country to try to share her story with the hope of bridging connections with other API families, especially, hoping that they'll also then stand up. And, if we're all standing up, then you can't just hammer the one nail that's sticking up, right? And my dad is sort of the silent supporter, but he's always sharing how proud he is of my mom and the work that she's doing, and that he's loves and embraces me as his son. And so I feel very, very privileged to have a supportive family and to have their unconditional love. And so, yeah, I just want to say thank you again for allowing me to participate, and for lifting up the stories of LGBTQ folks at ULV.
Thank you so much. I've heard you speak several times when you come to Laverne, or virtually as well, and I've filled every time. So thank you so much, and for the work that you're doing as well. So our next speaker is one of my closest friends from my time at Laverne. We met at our first day, a freshman in college, in our 8 a.m. class, French class with Dr. Laboratory, and we've been friends ever since. Oh, you remember that? We talked forever, so we probably interrupted him a little bit. We should probably apologize. And as I said, we've been friends ever since then, and Sophia makes us so proud. She is an analyst, an activist, a community leader, an organizer. She mentors young organizers. I was going to brag on that, but I know Missy said we're short on time, so I'll keep going. She's a co-founder of Women's March San Francisco, a commissioner on the Department of Status of Women for the City of San Francisco, and among other roles, boards, and accomplishments. She's my friend date twice a month at least. And so I am so happy to have Sophia Andari here with us today. Please fill your screen with clap emojis as we welcome Commissioner Andari.
Thank you so much, Ebony. Thank you so much all for having me here. Ebony, I always call you my twin sister, you know that. I am first generation queer Lebanese American, activist, organizer, and commissioner. And here is my story about finding my voice in 5 minutes. I wrote it out. I timed it for 5 minutes. Let's see if it's gonna work. I was born in Michigan, but my parents were missing home. So we moved back to Lebanon when I was 3 years old, because they thought the Civil War ended, or they thought it did. The war restarted a few months after we arrived. We stayed in Lebanon for about 4.5 years, during which the war was on and off. And when I was 8 years old, my parents finally decided that we had to come back to the US so that my sister and I can go to school without interruption. During a war, school was closed too often. I struggled in school. When I came to the US, I struggled in school, and this was Los Angeles. I struggled in school with language. I knew very little English and mostly spoke Arabic and French. I was teased. I mostly kept my head down and did just enough to get decent grades, but I didn't think I was capable of more than what I was doing. I had a teacher tell me that I was hopeless and can't be taught because I was a bad speller and horrible at grammar, which I am in English, French, and Arabic, but at least I speak 3 languages. That stuck with me and made me fear my voice. I was worried that if I mispronounced words or if I misused a word, that people would laugh at me. So I was also dealing with being queer and just kind of being scared that I'm gonna get outed, right? So I was very reserved. And it wasn't until 10th grade of high school when another teacher, a good teacher, pushed me to see my full potential and that I was a natural born leader. And I started working harder in school. And because I was queer and closeted, I also knew that I had to be self-reliant. So I made sure to get into college. I was the first person in my family to attend a 4-year university at ULV. I did well at ULV, mainly because I mostly just studied. I seriously didn't party. I kind of regret that. I should have partied a little bit more than I did. But I did well in school, but I always hated giving presentations, and I always had a fear of public speaking. I would shake, I would stutter. I'm not a stutterer, so I don't know where that comes from. I would get so nervous that I would forget words. I would remember them in other languages, but not in English. I would actually go blank. It was actually pretty bad. Never in a million years would I have ever believed that I would be someone that I would believe that I believed that I would become a public speaker, that I would be doing panels, that I would be speaking at rallies, and then doing TV interviews for that matter. I have been able to do all of these things because I got to the point where I realized I had to silence the voices in my head telling me that I can't, or that I don't look like what a leader is supposed to look like, and realized my voice and lived experiences as a queer woman of color and a war survivor is just as important and as powerful as anyone else's stories and voice. And honestly, and I'm sorry, Ebony, you're probably gonna yell at me about this, but honestly, I also just stopped giving a fuck. I really did. In November 2016, when a racist, sexist, white supremacist, I'm being kind here, there's more words I can use, made it to the highest office in the country, I knew I had to act. We were under attack, and being a queer woman of color, I did what we do best, and that's organize. I co-founded Women's March San Francisco and was unanimously voted to chair the organization. It is 100% volunteer run. We made it a priority to amplify voices of women of color. We always had at all of our events, especially our rallies, 80% women of color on the stage. And the other 20% were white women, white identified women. We've never allowed men on the stage because they already have more than enough platforms. So we really concentrated on women of color and marginalized, and women from marginalized communities. And in doing that, I started realizing that my voice needed to be heard because I didn't see much representation in politics or in leadership that looked like me. Especially there's not a lot of Middle Eastern representation. And I didn't think someone like me honestly would ever be listened to or would even be heard. But now I know that in order to really have true equity, we can't have true equity until everybody can be their authentic selves and have their voice heard, and not somebody speaking for us, but rather us speaking for ourselves. Don't get me wrong, I still get nervous, I still shake. I just had to learn how to push through it because representation matters. And I wanted to make sure that I continue putting myself out there to help, especially the younger generation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And the work you're doing is incredibly empowering to listen to, and I could listen to much more of it. We know we're getting close to our 1 o'clock stop time, but we may go over just a few minutes because we want to make sure the scheduled speakers have a chance to speak. So I have the delight of introducing one of our students, Masa Shah. Masa is a third-year student majoring in psychology and minoring in creative writing. Masa is planning to pursue a PhD in clinical psychology after graduating from Laverne. And it's really delightful to have you here. So I turn it over to you, Masa, and don't feel like you need to rush through. We're here, glad to have your story.
Hello, everyone. My pronouns are she, hers, her, hers. I'd like to talk about spirituality. I am Muslim, and growing up as Muslim has been very difficult for me because of how majority of the community views homosexuals and the LGBTQ community in general. It's been really lonely growing up Muslim, not knowing anyone else who identified with the same religion and sexuality, and having family members who have not been very kind to me. But I've been able to overcome this with a sense of empathy for others and myself, and with a mind shift with looking at religion beyond punishment and reward, but something that's just experienced, and just experience life as more of something where we're all connected in this more monoism instead of this dualistic good and evil. And that's how I overcame my loneliness, and I feel a lot more connected with the world. I'd like to share a couple poems I wrote because that's how I express myself. The infinitude of time is justified by the finite flesh. It is the decay, the sweet decay, where heat abides. Flesh feathers into the soil, waiting patiently, patiently to float in a steaming tar river of plants and stars, to gather up the chaotic fossils throughout the journey and mend and melt and mix and stir this power into a stew, swallow it and digest this absurd destiny of a bounded and boundless body. And the next poem I'd like to share is a little bit more conversational. Every mistake I've made before. I am addicted to the taste of repetition, the never-ending circle. It warms me. It keeps me safe. I never want to let go of my suffering. I never want to wish for a better day. Like the lungs fill infinitude of inhales and exhales, I want to breathe in the same air, the same molecules, the same scent. Like a child is born, grows, and dies, like the body awakens, weakens, crumbles, and sleeps, like the day and night, like the trees change leaves, like the decay and birth, dualism has morphed into monism. There is nothing more. You've seen it all. And if this doesn't make you cry in joy, nothing will. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Masa. I hope that you know you have a community here with us. Now, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Whitney to make an announcement.
Oh, hey, an announcement.
Or to share, my apologies.
I grew up in the Boy Scouts, and being gay there was hard, and then I left for a bit. And recently, they did a profile in this newsletter called Morally Straight, which I love the title of it, for LGBTQ members. So they did a profile on me, and I shared that with Misty to use in the program or to use however she'd like. So the story of just getting to come back and be in a space that I really that really taught me to be me, and now that I get to be kind of a mentor and a role model for younger scouts is kind of cool. So Misty, you can send that out or post it on wherever, and it's there. You can read that. Thanks for my announcement.
Thank you, Dr. Whitney. And we have Ebony wants to make an announcement. We're finalizing the program, you all. Just bear with us a couple more minutes while we have this announcement.
Hey, this is real quick. I was trying to send you the flyer, but it's just nothing's working. But I do want to tell you that we are doing a micro volunteering event tomorrow, but I think I will just keep it going until we finish our projects. But we're connecting with 3 organizations that are impacting the LGBTQIA2S+ community in beautiful ways. I'm connecting to healthcare, housing, you know, a lot of different things. And there are opportunities for folks, especially students, to reach out and start start talking to elected officials, to start expanding their network, to use their skills with social media, to really make an impact on the community. So I don't know if you all are familiar with micro volunteering, but it's that if we all do a little bit, then it can add up to a lot. So 10 minutes, we've built it so you can come in, drop in for 10 minutes or stay for the full 4 hours to hang out with me online, listen to music, and do some work to help the community. So if you are available, please drop in and I will try and find the flyer to drop in the chat. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ebony. So to end this event, this was beautiful. It was just I'm so impacted by all of your stories. Thank you so much. We're continuing to celebrate April. Please look at the calendar of events, and Ramadan Mubarak.